OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection Podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. Hello, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Omnipresent Information Connection. On this episode, we are doing the second episode of a three-part series on emotional, physical, and spiritual intelligence. And so for this episode, we are going over the physical body's intelligence, the intelligence of the physical body. And we've already talked about this on other podcasts, including the Authenticity Podcast, the intelligence and the intuition of the brain and the heart, and other podcasts like it. So there is a lot of profound information on this episode that we're going to be giving you. My name is Noah Hansen, and I'm here with Kevin Peterson. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Doing great, Noah. Thank you for asking.
Now, there's a lot of golden nuggets that are going to be featured on this podcast, so we want to make sure that you have a pen and paper so that in case you get any of those golden nuggets that you want to remember and apply to your life today, that's what it's all about. So we want you to be able to write that down and apply it to your life today, because the information that we talk about is not only good for you to listen to, but it's also wonderful when you apply it to your life and see the results for yourself that we're talking about, especially on the intelligence of the physical body.
Yes.
So one of the main points that we're going over in this episode is how we can have mastery over our own physical bodies. We can even have mastery over the expressions that our genes create in us. We don't have to be slaves to certain genes in our bodies. And this is a brand new field of science. It's called epigenetics, and we'll be getting into that later on in this podcast. Kevin, physical intelligence, what do you think?
Well, first and foremost, to the listeners, is that I'm glad to be able to be kind of rehashing, going over some of this, because in the previous or in the past episodes, we were able to just kind of skim over it. And this gives a more delicate, deeper dive into being able to understand not only the physical intelligence of things, but why it's so important that we actually have more power and more authority by God to be able to overcome obstacles and issues ever than before.
That's right. That's right. And as many of the listeners know, we talk about Jesus Christ quite often on this podcast because he is the greatest example we have of physical mastery.
Yes.
He not only mastered his own physical body and his own physical health and had complete control over where that was going, what was able to affect it and what wasn't able to affect it, but he also was able to cleanse and clean the physical bodies of everyone else around him.
Absolutely.
As long as they had faith in who he was.
Yes.
And what he could do.
Amen. So when it comes to physical intelligence, most people ask, well, what is it? Is it just a feeling? Just an emotion?
Well, it has a lot to do with that, doesn't it?
It does. So let me give you kind of a brief overview, and so that you'll have a good starting point to be able to understand. Physical intelligence, we can strengthen our cognitive function and alter our mood, emotional responses, stress, confidence, and happiness levels at will.
Wait, hold on. Are you telling us, Kevin, that we can manage our own stress, we can overcome it by choice?
Yes, through our cognitive function, and we can alter our mood, our emotional responses, stress, confidence, and happiness. All these levels we can command.
Wow, that's a new way of thinking about things, isn't it?
It definitely is. So, when we're talking about physical intelligence, questions often arise as far as how can the physical intelligence be improved? You know, what is the physical quotient? What is the meaning of spiritual intelligence? What is the study of intelligence called? All these factors have come up throughout the weeks and the months that people have reached out to us. And we'll be covering all of it. But most importantly, is physical intelligence is the ability to detect and actively manage the balance of key chemicals in our bodies so that we can achieve more, stress less, and live a work and life balance happily.
Wait, so that sounds like our bodies aren't just machines running on autopilot. We actually are the controllers. We have the controls to our own bodies.
Yeah, so imagine our bodies being the new, PS5s, right?
Right.
we actually are the controllers, the physical handlers of those states and elements in our lives.
Now, not only that, but when there is a bug or a virus or something like that that is influencing our physical bodies, it's not just a piece of technology where it's going to break down and no longer be able to be used anymore. We can actually diagnose that problem and solve it with just our consciousness, with our minds and emotions.
Yeah, but the most important part and the takeaway is flexibility. Being creative, innovative, and collaborative, having high self-esteem and respect for others, effectively engaging and influencing others, adapting to different behavioral styles and agendas, and being agile and quick thinking, and finally, embracing an instinctive change that needs to take place in our physical intelligence.
Now we can just start doing a little bit of a recap into what we talked about in the emotional intelligence podcast, which was the one previous to this one. When we have emotional intelligence, we can then recognize when we're starting to feel an emotion start to rise up in us, a negative emotion. We can instantly start to see when that's coming up. And there are certain steps that we can take that we laid out for you in the last podcast, where we told you how you can recognize the emotion and then switch to a different pathway, switch to perceiving your emotions in a new way, and then take your emotions in a different direction than where they're previously going.
Yeah, so to be able to break it down simply is that it gives you the pathway to be able to make an intelligent, well-informed decision on an emotional level, to be able to handle the things that are happening to you at that moment.
Right, so emotional intelligence is key to be able to navigate this world and not be overcome by it, not be a slave to the outside events and scenarios in life.
Correct. So with physical intelligence, the physical part is what helps put it all together. It's what really helps to be able to manifest the difference that you're looking for and receiving in your life. The physical part allows you to be able to put into practice, put into good works, the things that you're wanting to be able to manifest in the flesh.
Right, so physical intelligence doesn't just have to do with mastery over our physical bodies, but it also has to do with mastery over our physical world outside of ourselves.
Correct.
The environment that we're placing ourselves in.
Yeah, and that's why, listeners, as you know, especially these very powerful women of God, is that they have to be able to physically put on a mask called makeup, and they feel like that they need to be able to make up the difference in beauty in order to be able to be beautiful. And what's happening in 2020 is women are sidelining the makeup because they're actually being able to see their natural, raw, physical state as being beautiful. And so for a lot of women, they are going more el natural, if you want to be able to put it in those words, right? Because it's important that they can be able to see themselves for who they truly are. And they are absolutely beautiful. So when it comes to physical intelligence in women, they actually have it in a higher level than we men, because they have to chemically, biologically adapt, and so enabled to emotionally, physically, and spiritually put things in a very beautiful package called intelligence. And their intelligence amplifies their environment allowing them to be able to examine what's going on and make an intelligent, well-informed decision. To where us men in the world, we dominate the physical. We want to be able to dominate, to be able to crush, to be able to destroy, to be able to handle all these things. But emotionally and spiritually, most men take a back seat. It's only those great Christian men, brothers, that are listening to this podcast that understand that they have to have all three elements to be able to be whole and complete.
Yes, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And that's the whole intention behind this podcast, to cover every aspect, every angle of how you can be more empowered today.
So, beautiful women of God, understand I've got your back. That we understand you for the first time in a long time, because most people try to figure, the opposite sex out. So, what is a woman thinking? What is she feeling? What is she believing in? All those things.
Oh, yeah.
God has a very romantic and beautiful way of being able to show you in the Bible how effective real women of God are.
Oh, yes.
The very first example that was given to any man was Jesus' mother and her empowerment. And you have to understand, listeners, is that she did not have a very polished education, right?
Right. Many women back then didn't.
Mm-hmm. But what she had was instinct, and not only maternal instinct, but just instinct in general. 2, she was emotionally sound because she became pregnant in a very unorthodox way.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And then 3rd, she was able to rationalize what was happening to her and what she needed to have happen to be able to have then, whom was her husband?
That'd be Joseph.
Joseph, to guide her physically to her appointed destiny with her then now born son, Jesus Christ, right?
That's right.
So if it wasn't for the man to be able to physically guide the woman, then she would have probably had a completely different experience in the whole birthing of Jesus Christ in the first place. But combined together, they in harmony were able to find a place for Jesus to become born, and then to be able to raise him, have more children on top of that, and to be able to have a very godly life together. The greatest harmony that you'll ever experience in your life is one man and one woman in unison working together for a harmonious goal, right?
That's right. And Joseph was in large part, he was a protector of the family, and he made the calls when it came to traveling to Egypt, traveling to Bethlehem, to be able to escape the hands of the king of Jerusalem at that time.
Mm-hmm. And also he was in charge of the finances, right?
Yes. Yep.
But all while this is happening, in order for him to be a great man, she herself had to be a great woman to be able to enable, to be able to raise up, to be able to help in the aiding in the elements that he was weak in, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to become the man he was, to be able to be the father to Jesus Christ in a manner that was suiting to Jesus Christ when he became an adult himself.
Yes, and just like it says in God's word, if Mary had not respected Joseph and trusted his calls when it came to where to take the family and where to put the finances, and if Joseph had not loved Mary with agape love, then it would have been a completely different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that we see that Joseph loved her with agape love is he didn't want to stone her or anything when he had assumed that she had gotten pregnant by a false or
just someone else,
an adulterous
yeah.
mean. Yeah. So he actually wanted to protect her from that outcome of being stoned and just divorce her quietly.
Yes.
And so then we saw there was angelic intervention, and they were told the truth of this scenario, and then they had to adapt and move and make decisions in order to keep their child safe.
But they had to leave the environment that they were in because of what was going to be the ongoing persecution of a single woman being pregnant out of wedlock, right?
Yes, and a lot like the disciples of Jesus, they had to completely leave their pasts behind and then move into the future, which was much brighter, ultimately.
And so now, with you having that kind of knowledge that it takes a great woman to be able to make a great man, now Noah, let's complete the finality of physical intelligence.
Yes, so we have more about the science of epigenetics that I want to tell you about, and just to give you a little bit of a background into how epigenetics was discovered, there is a scientist, and he's still alive today. His name is Bruce Lipton, who started researching in 1967 at the University of Virginia, where he worked with the early leaders of stem cell research, which is a very profound field. Now, in stem cell cultures, he noticed that the stem cells would alter their expressions based on the environment that they were in. So these stem cells that came, they had the same genetic makeup. He placed in different environments, and he noticed and he realized that based on the environments that these identical stem cells were placed in, they had different outcomes. They were turned into different cells, bone, muscle, and skin tissue. So in 1991, it took from 1967 all the way to 1991 for the rest of science to be able to back it up and accept these findings. So science realized in 1991 that he was right in his observations, and then they coined the science, or they coined the name of this field of science, epigenetics. So epigenetics actually has a deeper meaning behind that word. Epi means above, and then genetics is obviously, everyone knows what genetics is. So epi is above what we previously believed about genetics. And so what this is saying is there is a higher means of control of our genetic makeup that is above just genetics. Our genetics are not in control or mastery over who we are. It is something more above that is in control of how our genetics express themselves. So when there's a family that believes that cancer is running in their family because of a certain gene, that's actually oftentimes a false assumption. It is the environment that these people are placing themselves in that causes cancer to run in the family. There is an environment issue, not a genetics issue. So this is a very new understanding of what exactly is going on when it comes to certain genetics causing certain things. That's actually a false assumption. It's the environment of the genetics that causes them to behave a certain way. So this new field of science says that our genes are being controlled by something higher or above them. Now, that control, what is controlling them is who we are. It's our minds. It's our emotions. Because when we have certain emotions, it causes certain chemicals to be released into our bloodstream. And then when we are in fight or flight, it releases different chemicals.
Correct.
That causes different outcomes in our bloodstream. And the blood then surrounds the genetics. We can learn to have more control and even mastery over our own genes. That's what this is telling us. So, Kevin, how do we gain mastery over our own bodies? It's a simple 3-step process.
Yes. Learn what works, what causes genes to be more healthy. 2, apply that to our daily lives. And 3, become more healthy and continue to do the steps of application.
Right. So all you really need to know is what emotions, what feelings, what thoughts are lifting our genes to be a healthier expression, and then what thoughts, emotions, and feelings are causing our genes to be in a less healthy expression.
Absolutely. So the most important thing is that you will start to be able to see in our podcast, in our broadcast, that there is beautiful power in 3s.
Yes, there is. Yep.
And you got feel, felt, realized.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Learn, apply, and teach.
Right. Then there's other threes that are equally as important that we have broadcasted or have mentioned in other past podcasts, right?
Right. And why do you think we're doing a 3-part series, emotion, physical, and spiritual?
The reason why we do things in threes is because Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, where 2 or more are gathered in Jesus' name, is the church, right? In order to be able to be fully embodied, we need to be able to have these 3 elements mastered in our lives in order to be able to proclaim our life as being whole and complete.
That's right. I agree 100% there.
And so that's why we're going over the physical part, because physically is where we have the opportunity and the chance to start to really put things together, put things in place that are so desperately needed in our lives that have become absent of mainstream educational systems that has prohibited us from being able to stretch and grow as people to be able to physically then in the flesh put things together. Most of the educational systems that we have is to be able to get an education that takes you to no destination other than just whatever that field of study was.
That's right.
The physical intelligence allows you to be able to have an expanded awareness, not only of your environment, but other education as well, to be able to be in unison and harmony with the other 2 elements, the emotional side and the spiritual side, when guiding yourself to that destination.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so pumped to be able to be bringing you our website, inaneway.com, because on there, everything is sourced to that website. There are multiple different pathways that you can take to be able to learn about the same subjects and get a deeper understanding if you follow multiple pathways on our website. So when it comes to physical intelligence, there's something I want to tell you about, and it's what we've talked about in the Heart-Brain Intuition episode of the OIC podcast, as well as some others. And we only touched on it in those episodes, but I also have a walkthrough video where I tell you a very simple 3-step process. And this 3-step process is going to allow you to gain greater mastery over your own physical intelligence.
Yes, because with the Heart Math Institute and what they're all about is being able to bring to the surface the authenticated truth for you to be able to then be able to do something proactive about it and with it. And the field of study and what they preach and they teach is really sound because it deals with everyday activities that we do, but they do it in a new way.
Yeah,
and
that's
so,
right.
If you'd like to be able to have a further study and a walk in that study, Noah Hansen is fantastically certified in that, and he can be able to help step you through that program.
That's right. I'm certified to be able to talk about this and teach people about this 3 quick coherence technique is what I present in that video. So you can see that on my personal blog, A New Way with Noah. We'll have that linked in the description of this podcast. Now, the reason this is so powerful is because it is backed by decades of research by the Heart Math Institute. They've spent decades developing the perfect 3-step process in order for you to gain more emotional mastery, more physical mastery, and then more spiritual mastery as well. They like to keep it more on the emotional and physical side because that's the side that is more scientific in this day and age. Now, science is starting to become more spiritual with the inclusion of quantum physics, but we don't need to get into that in this podcast. We'll talk about that on the spiritual intelligence episode that'll come out after this one. So this quick coherence technique is very simple, and I want you to be able to watch that video and apply this technique to your life because it's, like I said, it's backed by years of research. It may seem a little unorthodox or not what you're used to, but it is backed and proven to be effective no matter who you are. If you apply this 3-step process, it will allow you to be at a greater state of health emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah, and listeners, you have to understand is that we try to keep things as simple as possible because we understand the complex nature of who you are, your environment, and who you surround yourself with, right? So those 3 elements as well.
Oh, yes.
So a lot of it has to do with consciousness. Noah, talk to me more about consciousness.
Well, consciousness is one of the most important influences on what's called protein behavior, how proteins behave. And these proteins are that environment that our genes are placed in. So protein behavior determines the gene expression. And when your consciousness is influencing protein behavior, as it's been scientifically proven to be able to do, that then in turn allows the proteins to behave in a healthier way and those genes to express themselves in a healthier way or in a less healthy way.
So Noah, give us a physical example from what you have done that allows that to be able to be resonatable to the listeners.
Well, when we are in harmony with positive vibrations, with positive frequencies, then we then are at a greater state of physical health. This is proven in epigenetics. When we are feeling emotions of love, of peace, of relaxation, then we will then have a healthier body than if we are in stress constantly, if we are fearful constantly. So how I battle fear in my life, how I battle stress in my life, is what we talked about on the last emotional intelligence episode, the quick switch from one pathway to another. And all it takes is conscious awareness of, I'm going in a direction I don't want to go in right now. It's not going to benefit me or anyone else to be in a state of fear, especially when we're worrying about things that we can't control in our environments, right? Mm-hmm. So in order to gain that control over our internal environments, what I do personally is I apply that 3-step process of heart-brain coherence. It's called the quick coherence technique. And I almost immediately can feel a change. I can feel peace. And then another step that I simultaneously with the quick coherence technique do is I bring God into the situation.
Immediately.
And when God is before me, when God is behind me and on both sides of me, then there is absolutely nothing that I need to be anxious of or in fear of, simply because of his promises, simply because of what he's already told me and what I've known to be true.
And listeners, he couldn't have explained it any better.
Thank you, Kevin.
This is the omnipresent part of our omnipresent information connection. So I encourage you to be able to play back that section, because what he just explained in omnipresent is being present in the moment, handling your business the way that God appointed you to be able to handle in the first place, in a new way.
That's right.
And so, listeners, omnipresent is important. That's why we've got it in the title. That's why we've got it part of the teaching, is because you need to be present in the moment to be able to handle your business the way that God appointed you to want to handle it. And then from there, emotionally and spiritually, those two elements then become the gift of the physical, because you ended up doing physically the right thing to be able to bring those elements forward in order for you to be able to have that type of life and lifestyle that you have really dreamed of having all the days of your life.
Wonderfully put, Kevin. Thank you for that conclusion to this episode. We are at 30 minutes now, so we will conclude it there. And if you want to learn more about what we were talking about on this podcast, like I said, there will be links in the description of this podcast. And then we'll also link you to our website, to where you can go on a journey of discovery into all the profound and important, vital information that will enable you to have more mastery, more control over your emotional, physical, and spiritual states on a daily basis. So this is an important episode, and I'm glad that we can broadcast this out to the world today. If you've benefited from what we've said on this podcast, then please let us know in the comments section. Reach out to us if you are in need, or anyone you know of is in need of a life coaching service, because Kevin and I are both master certified life coaches. And then last but not least, we also have a merchandise store with a pay it forward program in which we will put all the financial contributions to that store towards a positive outcome in someone else's life immediately. So if you are also wanting to be a part of that pay it forward program and in need of some of the financial ways that we can benefit your life, then please reach out to us and we will speak about that one-on-one to be able to come up with some way that we can aid you in your life today. That's what we're all about. That's what inaneway.com is all about and what it was created for. So thank you for valuing what we do on this podcast on inaneway.com. We'll meet you on the next episode, Spiritual Intelligence of the OIC Podcast.
This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.